What you mustn't do, however, is confuse the fact that something can be disguised with the fact that it's only used for nefarious purposes. The majority of people who use digital money transfers outside of the traditional banking system are doing it legitimately. And certainly in the Philippines, with the overseas workers, they pay a lot to transfer money with Western Union or whatever to their home provinces. With blockchain, that can be done so much cheaper. And in fact, Gcash, the local champion of digital payments, was the first blockchain digital payment remittance network in the world.
Welcome and good day to season 20, episode 5. And today we will be talking about fintech. Now, fintech is something I'm sure all of us have heard of. Some of us know a lot about it, some of us know very little about it. And maybe to bridge that gap, we've invited Daniel Broby. He's a professor actually in AIM, Asian Institute of Management, and he previously held the chair of financial technology at Ulster University and was the director for financial and regulatory technology. Well, I'll allow Daniel to continue talking about this. Maybe he's a much better person to talk about these things. So maybe, Professor, maybe we can start with explaining a little bit about what you're doing in AIM and in the last work experiences you have.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Paul, and good day to everyone as well. So essentially, my role here is as full faculty, where I am responsible as the director of the programs that we have related to financial technology. So in that respect, we have both an educational role and a research role, as well as indeed a knowledge exchange role, which I guess is part of what this podcast is doing. Um, so let me just step back a little bit, if that's okay, and just define financial technology. I think we need to set the scene. So Fintech itself is a neologism, which is a combination of two words, finance and technology. So in that respect, it is used in many different ways by different people. A lot of journalists, for example, use it to mean innovation in the financial sector. But I think it's got a more scholarly meaning, which is that we are transitioning financial services to the internet. And that has a lot of implications. It's got implications for business models, for how we process and analyze financial services, and for the way that we effectively communicate and do business in this sector.
Absolutely. And I'll go back a little further in time. And they were actually interviewing, I'm sure you know Lucky Luciano, right? By name at least. Uh, well, for those who don't know, he was part of the group that actually organized crime in the 30s. Okay, they set up a board, and he was like the finance mind for the whole thing. And to make a long story short, the US, instead of putting him in jail because he helped them out during the war effort, they sent him back home, which was Naples. And he was allowed to stay there, and he died natural causes. And there was somebody interviewing him some time back. And the interviewer asked him, he said, if you had to do it over again, what would you do differently? And he said, I would do it legally. And I think in the whole finance sector, there's a lot of possibilities for such events to happen where, based on even though it's legal, they're still pulling off these funny stunts where they just make money out of the blue or they cheat somebody along the way. And as you transition into the internet, I think the opportunity gets bigger for that to happen. So, especially about regulations, what are you seeing going on in the world when it comes to that?
Yeah, so one of the aspects of transitioning financial services to the internet is that you have new forms of money payment and money transfer. And as you've alluded to, there is a grey sector that essentially wishes to move money around without being identified and the source of proceeds and so forth. We have, in most jurisdictions, certainly in the Philippines, some well-defined rules about anti-money laundering, know your customers, being able to work out financing for terrorism and so forth. So the law governs how people effectively show evidence of where they sourced their money from. Now, with pseudo-anonymity in, for example, crypto assets, then you find that it's difficult to trace and or be able to have an audit trail for those sorts of individuals. What you mustn't do, however, is confuse the fact that something can be disguised with the fact that it's only used for nefarious purposes. The majority of people who use digital money transfers outside of the traditional banking system are doing it legitimately. And certainly in the Philippines, with the overseas workers, they pay a lot to transfer money with Western Union or whatever to their home provinces. With blockchain, that can be done so much cheaper. And in fact, Gcash, the local champion of digital payments, was the first blockchain digital payment remittance network in the world.
Oh, wow. In the world. That's impressive. I had no idea. Okay. And it's really good to know that we're actually leading it. Okay, I would say I'm surprised
Yeah,
with
and
that.
and and it's not just Gcash, it's that because the diaspora is so large, you've got
Yes.
remittances coming from all sorts of different jurisdictions, and each jurisdiction has a different kind of payment infrastructure. So the banks here have to be able to receive from Dubai, from Hong Kong, from New York, London,
Right.
Europe, or whatever, different types of payment messaging. And this is just one aspect of fintech. But that payment messaging means that because of all the different types that are inbound, the Philippines is actually at a forefront of adoption of this
Oh.
technology. It has no choice. This money is coming in daily.
Right. Yes. From all over the place, literally. I did, that's just one aspect of fintech. What other aspects are you seeing that fintech maybe is maybe evolving or showing showing how it's different from the classical banking methods?
Yeah, so if we take the definition that I gave of migration of financial services to the internet, that means that there's an explosion in data. And that data can no longer be fit on a traditional banking ledger or an Excel spreadsheet. It has to be handled with programming code. So what we do with our graduates is that we train the students to program in Python, which is a high-level programming language, so they can process big data. At the same time, you need to be able to analyze that data in different ways. And also, the way that you can analyze data becomes real time rather than at the close of business. So, for example, you can measure, just taking something random, individual footfall from Google. You can look at Google Trends for searches and trend searches. All of these data points being made every time we move somewhere with our mobile, for example. And
Right.
the same goes for our financial transactions. We leave what's called a digital footprint. And we now, in financial services in the future, need to be able to uh, accommodate that, provide new products, and or at least understand the customers and what the customers are doing with their financial services. So programming and big data analytics are kind of what's new in the fintech educational sphere.
What are some challenges that you see when there's so much data? I mean, I'm sure you've seen this happen even before big data, where some companies measure data, but they don't know either how to put it together or they're looking at the wrong data points, or and now with more data, is it how do you work through that?
Well, it's when you start talking about such large data, you're talking about terabytes and very large quantities. They can't be transferred by an email or something like that. You have
Right.
to transfer data sets through flat files. You have to use cloud computing. You have to work out how to sort of compress the data and then reconfigure it at the other side, CVS files and so forth. So there's in terms of data science, we're not talking about giant leaps here, but we are talking about giant leaps for a bank that would previously have dealt with everything in-house, and the ledger would be something which originally started as a physical ledger, is now migrating to even distributed ledgers over the internet, which is a function of the fact that your nodes, your point of access to the internet can be anything from a device, mobile
Right.
device, to a computer, to a server, or whatever.
Oh, interesting. And let's say I'm a traditional bank where I have my brick and mortar stores first. Okay. Obviously, the structure for that won't work for the for the migration into the cloud, if you want to say, even just that. So typically, for those kind of banks, so traditional banks, and this also has to do maybe with parts of leadership, which we'll also discuss a little bit about. Uh, how are they struggling? How are they working through that step? Are
Yeah.
the transforming from the brick and mortar to something else?
So great expression, brick and mortar, in a banking context. So if you go to Europe and you look at the big banking headquarters, you will see some architecture, Corinthian or whatever, but these will be gigantic structures that look almost impenetrable. Now, that was for a reason, which is
Yeah.
that when they were built, it was to give people confidence that the banks were safe. Now, in an internet world, you need to give people confidence that your bank in your digital wallet on your telephone is equally safe. But we can't do that by building giant walls. What we have to do is give people confidence in the protocols and the approaches and the reliability that those devices have. Uh, so there's a lot of psychology involved in terms of your interaction with your mobile banking. Uh, there's also psychology involved in how many clicks it takes for you to do
Yes.
something, and also how secure we can make it with, for example, authentication and multi-party authentication, face authentication, and so forth. So, as you can hear, all these technologies emerging together. Now, uh, not only is that relevant from a bank brick and mortar point, but the other thing is it's a lot cheaper to have a digital interface with a client than a traditional brick and mortar bank. So these branches are expensive. They're expensive to man, they're expensive to run the electricity, air conditioners, and stuff like that. So it changes the dynamics between the digital banks and the what we call the incumbents. And that dynamic really is why fintech is gaining so much media attention because we're talking about 20% of the world global domestic product. In other words, the wealth generated in the world is generated by the banking sector. And that's currently being disrupted by new entrants who have far cheaper cost structure, more secure, faster, more efficient. So the
Right.
old style bank where you go in and set up an account, filling in paper forms and things like that, are starting to become extinct.
No, it's unusual because uh I have apps from both that are literally started as a soft bank and those that came from brick and mortar and then are evolving. And even in just the app, there's a different feel if it's just the soft bank initially, not going from brick and mortar. There's a very different feel to the app. And personally, yeah, I feel more comfortable using it. Just seems naturally easier to use. Maybe it could be the click count or just even the way the colors and the icons are arranged. But I've noticed that difference even in just the app. Okay, and I'm sure that there's a huge difference in their cash flow because a brick and mortar carries a lot of fixed costs.
Yeah. But,
Okay. All
but
right.
it's easy to be evangelical about this because we're on the
Yes.
side of cost and efficiency and
Right.
security. But the traditional banks do have two things that the challengers
Yes.
don't have. They have a balance sheet. In other words,
Yes.
they've got a lot of money already, assets and liabilities. And the other thing that they have is ownership of the clients. It's very
Ah.
difficult for a new entrant to suddenly get someone to become a banking client. There's a statistic that is sort of quite well known from the UK, which is that you're more likely in your lifetime to change your partner, get divorced or
Mm.
something, than you are your
Right.
bank account.
Oh, that's interesting. And I hope the traditional banks are responding because that's a huge advantage.
Yes,
It's a huge advantage to have the client base, just even the client base. That's a
exactly.
huge advantage in any industry. Okay.
And that's where Asia Institute of Management comes in as a business school. Well, I mean, we effectively train and teach people to get into the C-suite, but a lot of our students come from the banking sector. So they're working full time. Average age in fintech is about 37. So they're mid-level executives who basically want to go through the glass ceiling and learn how their organizations can face these challenges and adapt and change.
That's an interesting point because even with AI coming around, it is causing a problem in terms of leadership. When I say in leadership, I said you could be a great AI expert, but it doesn't mean you can manage a team of 20. Okay. Now, as you move in from, let's say, even if you're a director in a bank, if you go into the C-suite and you're not ready, even though you have all of the technology behind it, you have the technical skills. So let's talk about that movement, especially moving into the C-suite. If you're sitting at a director level already, uh, what are some of the biggest changes you have to look into or that have to happen to you as a leader when you move into the C-suite?
Yeah, well, mostly it's the rate of change and the technology adoption is so rapid that it's difficult even for experts to keep up. Bear in
Right.
mind that blockchain, which I'm sure people are familiar with the term if they're not familiar with the technology, has only been around since 2008. So somebody who went to university prior to that may be
I had
a
no idea.
perfectly good uh, director in terms of man management and so forth, but will not appreciate the technology that's currently disrupting the industry. So, what we need is, from a board perspective, is for there to be skill diversity, and that skill diversity has to include technical experts as well as, for example, financial risk experts and so forth in a banking context.
Well, the speed in itself is causes a lot of problems because it's very difficult to predict anything. Okay. For example, you look at GRC. Okay.
Yeah,
You say you put in guardrails, but historically speaking, an accident happens, then you put the guardrail. Okay.
exactly.
So you have to wait for something to happen. Uh, and in that case, yes, I might have the technological skills and all, but do you have that capacity to see what are possible issues that can happen? Even though you're entering a phase where, realistically, it's new, everything is new. Okay, is there anything that maybe you can recommend, or maybe in the past that is showing that you might have that kind of wisdom to see some issues before they actually happen and set it up so the guardrails are there before an accident happens?
Yeah, well, the saying goes that you can predict death and taxes. But aside from that, we also know for a fact that humans change their sentiment, and we therefore have business cycles. We have booms and bust, and when the
Yes.
bust comes, companies go bankrupt. That, from a banking perspective, means that your lendings are not going to be recovered. So we do know that we've had crises like the financial crisis and other crises in the past, but I can predict with certainty we will have another one. The trouble is, I
Oh,
don't know what
yes.
it is. So from a banking perspective, the challenge is how to manage your portfolio, how to diversify, how to manage the risk. Uh, Most people look at banks and think that it's all about the return. It's actually the opposite. It's about risk
Yes.
management. Now, with the new challenger banks, the risks are very different. Imagine a bank run in an all digital bank.
Mm.
Very tech savvy people. Uh, you can move your money with the press of a button. It used to be that bank runs like Northern Rock or whatever took a week.
Right.
That's the UK bank
Yeah.
run during the credit crisis, where people queued outside the physical branches.
Mm.
The bank runs of the future in terms of digital banks will literally be within hours. So the regulator also has to understand and be able to adapt to this change, these changing practices.
What have you seen so far? What are some of the best practices to adapt to such situations?
Well, the best practices are what all business schools teach, ourselves included. We incorporate a class on banking risk management, and that class is very focused on the techniques of how you identify inherent risk and how you end up and diversify that and end up with the residual risk. The frameworks are there. Uh,
Mm.
what happens in banking crisis is we tend to find that people haven't been applying them. And what happens is that hubris comes into things when we have
Right.
a period of exceptional growth or excitement. People cut corners, and actually, I'll go on a limb here and I'll say that right now AI has a lot, artificial intelligence has a lot of the earmarks of excessive exuberance. People are attributing so much to the artificial intelligence rollout that essentially they are overlooking some of the traditional things that a bank should be worried about. Like, for example, where does the revenue come from? Like, for example, what happens if you downsize all the workers? Where's the income going to come to
Right.
provide the other side of the monetary equation?
Well, I'm finally seeing some pushback on the AI exuberance, if you want to say. I remember when it started, it was all, this is it. This is the biggest thing in the universe, so forth and so on. It was really super exuberant. But there's some pushback now. There are a lot of people saying, hey, look, you know, uh, as a business model, it's not even working. It's that
Yeah.
they're sucking in so much money and nothing's
Well,
happened. Okay.
that's the generative AI business model, but
Right.
the benefits from productivity of AI
Oh,
are
yes.
exceptional. And for the Philippines, the IT BPO sector, which is the business process outsourcing sector, so the call centers, uh, we can create here in Makati essentially a uh, a LLM, a large language model with questions and answers, which is
Mm.
trained off a company's data set, which uses a human-like avatar, a voice, synthesized voice that basically does the same job that 8% of the Filipinos are doing in this sector. So that
Mm.
sector could potentially be really dramatically downsized or replaced by robotic um, call centers um, within a very short period of time. So I don't think people should underestimate the change that is coming from AI. But as I said, there are other business models. So that is a productivity benefit. But there are other business models that are basically just saying throw AI at it and we will make money. And that obviously is what happened during the dot-com. It doesn't work like that.
Right. You mentioned something earlier about you put in the frameworks and then the hubris comes over, and they start skipping steps or cutting corners and things like that. And it's that tendency, that human tendency was even well before technology. Okay.
Yes.
I
When
can
they
go back
invented
to
the wheel.
I
So,
can go back to King David, when he became king, look what happened. All right. Okay.
yeah.
So so that really is part of human nature. But in terms of especially the leadership, because a lot of people say we need new leadership, but I see it a little differently. I say you don't need new leadership. You have to understand that the values have changed because the leadership will follow the values. That's the way it is. If you're a company that focuses on making profit, that's the kind of leadership you're going to have. Okay, so it's more of a value thing. Okay, it's not necessarily a leadership thing. So with this coming just around the corner, it's already happening. What are some of the maybe changes in the values that you're seeing that might drive the leadership in the future?
Yeah, that's quite interesting because we in the Philippines have a different cultural set, and
Mhm.
leadership also relies very much on cultural input.
Mhm.
So we also have what's called a high power distance. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of confidence or respect given to the leader of
Mhm.
any organization. What that means, and in answer to your question, is that the leader needs to be on top of change because otherwise his failings are multiplied because people are assuming that he's doing what in a, a diversified board context in, for example, Europe, where we
Mhm.
have sort of supervisory boards that are more powerful than perhaps unitary boards.
Mhm.
Those issues are more pronounced.
That's interesting, especially the cultural values, because well, here in the Philippines, but generally in Asia, they're very hierarchical, if you want to say. There's that situation, and oftentimes, let's say you're my manager. In my mind, I was saying he should know that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm bringing in academic terms here, but that's what I mean by high power distance. So,
Yeah, I know, and it's so funny because when I facilitate these classes, I go, so look, he doesn't know it. Okay, and I just simply asked the leaders in the class. I said, "Okay, how many documents do you sign every day?" "Oh, we sign a lot." "Do you remember everything you sign?" "No, I don't." Exactly.
yeah,
And then there's the communication issue that because you're my boss, I won't talk to you, or I have, there are a lot of things there that will definitely contribute to how would you say defining the leadership in the future, because that has to be broken down very quickly. And considering how fast everything is moving, it has to be done very, very quickly.
yeah.
You
And it's
can't
not
just
just
sit
at the
around and
company
wait.
level. I mean, digressing a
Yes.
bit, we need to reshape society because we're going to find ourselves with a lot more leisure on our hands in a fairly short period of time. And we need to work out how people get compensated, whether so let's just take a sort of wild idea. When humans make production and manufacturing, we tax their income. When
Mhm.
robots do that, we don't tax their income. Why shouldn't robots, for example, have their income taxed so that their contribution to society is on the same level as the factors of production that currently exist?
You make an interesting point, and I'll point to Finland for this because they've managed to make the 4-day work week work fine. Okay, and some of it is technology driven because now, let's say as the worker, I can spend only 4 days in the office, and I can spend the other 3 days. And you make a point, and there's a lot of leisure time, but at the same time, you also, I'm sure you know this, that the way we relate to each other is changing. And I don't think it's changing in a good way, okay, because of all the social media and all that stuff. But yet you said we have time on our hands. Shouldn't we be focusing on, making those kind of things better, if you want to say, like maybe being a better dad or something or whatever? Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, there's a hierarchy of needs, and once we've solved food and water, we worry about housing, but we continue up that pyramid. And at the top of that pyramid has always been the things that advance societies, be Romans, Greeks, or whatever,
Right.
start to migrate to, which is philosophy, religion, logic, um, leisure, art. All of these things are uh, as we've progressed with different civilizations, we've
Right.
found that that's the way that society has gone. So I agree that we're clearly changing the way that we interact. But what we need to do is we need to do that in a way that elevates our participation in society and interaction with our peers.
This is diverging it just a little bit from the fintech topic, but when you said philosophy, because uh, the one thing that philosophy does well is, if you're doing it correctly, is it asks the right questions. Now, sometimes the questions have no answer; they're just there to encourage you to think better. And a lot of the technology today, I think, they didn't ask the right questions before they even developed them. They just developed them and said, "Hey, let's make a whole bunch of money," but they forgot to ask the right questions at the beginning.
Yeah,
Okay. So, I mean, there was some article I read on LinkedIn where they 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 haven't even figured out why, if AI should be for good or bad. I said, you should have asked it at the beginning. Okay, not
yeah,
now. It's too late. I go. So, when it comes to fintech, okay, when all this avalanche of technology coming in, and this and innovation being a buzzword, uh, it doesn't make sense for sometimes, yes, the speed is there, but sometimes you slow down a little bit and think a little bit about what you're doing rather than just going in because, the world around me is changing fast. I must change also.
yeah. Well, no one can slow things down. That's it's a collective move towards digitalization, towards
Right.
intelligence, and so forth that is unstoppable. But certainly, societal questions like so. Let's come to something very basic to finance. What is money? Uh, Now, the way that we think of money in a traditional centralized economy is that a central bank issues that, and that then becomes money supply, and we regulate that by interest rates. But the ability to print money is essentially down to the way and framework in which we set that central bank up. And almost every central bank prints more money each year. And some do it very badly, like, for example, Zimbabwe used to do, and some people manage it quite well. But that, when we had the credit crisis in 2008, was what resulted in Bitcoin being proposed by Nakamoto, who said, well,
Oh,
essentially, why should we have unlimited money supply? Why can't we limit the amount of monetary units in existence? And then we have inbuilt an anti-inflationary and also anti-business cycle approach into money. And that's where cryptocurrency came from. That it was
oh,
actually
wow.
a very, very conceptual view, which is that we, the bankers, I say we, the bankers, because I used to have a career in the industry, but the bankers failed. They failed in terms of trust.
Oh, yeah.
So the protocols of blockchain install trust cryptographically. So using computer programming, the internet is law, the code is
Right.
law. Essentially, you can't get
Hmm.
away from that.
Actually, I never knew that was the origin of cryptocurrency. And now that I hear it, I get these flashbacks of so many things that we invented with with goodness in mind, and then it was just corrupted along the way. Okay,
Yes.
somewhere along the way. Okay. Uh, but it's funny because I still remember in my economics class way back in the 70s. Okay, my teacher asked then, what are the possible side effects of coming off the gold standard? And I had no idea what to answer. Okay,
Yeah.
none at all. Okay. But then when I saw 2008 happen, I said, oh boy, now it makes sense to me. Okay. why why he asked that question? But then I had no idea.
Yeah.
But the cryptocurrency, it's like you are trying to go back to a gold standard. You're trying to say we only have a limited amount of resources, not a printing press that could just print as much cash as I want. Okay.
Yeah.
But
No, you
I'm
probably
re
used in those days then the textbook by Samuelson,
oh yeah.
um, where essentially markets were given free rein to do what they
Yeah.
what they felt. So
But again, that was also one of the in the 2008, that was one of the how would I say main factors. Europe was far more regulated than the US at that time. Okay, well, yes, European nations got involved because they were involved in the American markets, but generally speaking, they weren't as badly rocked because the regulations were still there. Okay,
yeah,
and I still remember I was talking to a private banker from Unicredit, Italian fellow, and he was the head of markets. And I was teaching him English while the whole thing was happening. Okay. Every single lesson, this is a disaster, Paul. I don't know what we can do. But then he explained a little bit that at least in Italy they're a little better regulated. So he said, but uh, I, I'm actually uh, I'm more than surprised that that was the actual origin of crypto. That was meant to really to try
yeah. Well,
to
it was born out of the financial crisis, I think is the best way to phrase it. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. So in your best estimate, in your thinking, yes, what will be probably the next disaster, if you want to say, or bust, if you want to say, and where do you see that it might be coming from?
well, in the seeds of every recovery, you sow the seeds for the next the next
Bust.
bust. And so in that respect, uh, the world, the central banks, through quantitative easing, which is essentially throwing money at a problem, have
Mhm.
moved debt from so the process has been that the companies, the banks got in trouble. That debt that they had during the credit crisis has been transferred to the balance sheet of countries. So we currently have a new debt problem, not the same debt problem. We have a
Mhm.
debt problem that America cannot afford to pay its bills. We have a problem that Europe doesn't. That essentially um, these countries are paying vast amounts of their tax revenue
Mhm.
to essentially pay interest on the money that they borrowed to bail us out of the last crisis.
Oh, okay, all right. That's it's scary also. Okay,
Oh
when you
yeah, but
think
as I
about
said, we can predict with certainty that there will be future crises.
no, considering the world practically runs off the dollar, you know what I mean? So you start thinking about, oh, okay.
Yeah, have to decide
But
whether you want to be paid in pesos or dollars, and
yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah. Well, it's bad when they start asking for, I need gold and we'll weigh it out. Okay, kind of deal. Okay. Uh, but let's look on the bright side in terms of innovation.
yeah,
What are some maybe innovations that you see upcoming, or maybe areas that need some innovation, or where innovation can definitely help us, maybe if not at least prevent, maybe prepare for the next bust.
yeah. Well, we haven't really touched on some of the other peripheral benefits of this transition of finance to the internet, but in more recent history, there's been a trend towards basically making data more freely available. And in Europe, they've pursued what's called an open banking agenda, where your financial data belongs to you, not to your bank. You have the right to request it. You have the right to, in Europe, permission someone else to request it on your behalf. If data is valuable in its own sense, because it can be data mined, then that gives rise to a whole bunch of new business models. So this open banking concept allows you to, for example, do credit analysis on someone's uh,
Yep.
banking transaction history. So think about what your credit rating is. Essentially, if you lose your job, you probably won't identify that in someone's credit rating for a couple of months because they will start spending on their credit card and stuff like that, but
Right.
they won't be defaulting for a while. They will still be living off savings. So their credit deteriorates 3 months before it's identified. Whereas with real time, using open banking, access to banking data, we can get instantaneous what's his bank transactions look like.
Mhm.
So that would mean that the financial system or certain companies can be more responsive to credit deterioration in the wider economy. And those companies that are better at that from a banking context, remember I said
Right.
banking is
Mhm.
management of risk, they will be the winners. The losers will be the ones that basically have got all the bad clients who start defaulting and going bankrupt. So essentially, being on the right side of technology really matters as we move into the next phase of things.
Oh, okay. That's fascinating. For our viewers, is there anything that maybe you can suggest that they like, for example, you're talking to your class, okay? What are some areas that you feel are areas that are worth pursuing in the whole in this area of innovative fintech?
Yeah, well, anything that can be done cheaper, faster, or more efficiently through technology is an opportunity. And uh, the incumbents are so large and so slow that they will not be able to capture that opportunity as fast as
Mhm.
somebody who has a very focused business model on how that will disrupt. Now, the theory of disruptive innovation by Christensen is something that's again taught in business schools. Uh, it's well established. We know what to do. We know how to innovate. We know how to essentially create new business models. We know how to effectively market those and raise capital for those. So, uh, my suggestion to people wondering what to do in this world is it's a giant opportunity. We've got the biggest, most profitable sector out there literally open for disruption, which is why fintech gains so much sort of notice in the press and stuff like that. They don't obviously think of it that way, but the reality is every time you hear about a new fintech doing this or doing that,
Right.
why is it interesting? It's interesting because it's beating up on the old guys.
Plus, considering the fact that here, at least here in the Philippines, as you mentioned earlier, we have to deal with remittances from practically the whole world. Okay, that's an additional layer for opportunities that can be there that are that if you sit down and thought about it, I'm pretty sure you can come up with some pretty smart ideas.
Yeah.
And maybe for especially from AIM, is there any event that you'd like to invite our viewers to, or something that maybe you'll be giving a talk or something, or AIM might be showcasing your classes?
Yeah, well, we do regular information sessions on our programs. So we have obviously fintech, of which we talk about what it is that we include in the syllabus so that people can see, sort of whether it fits them.
Right.
But
Right.
obviously, we do traditional MBA as well. That's where the history of AIM came from. We were set up in the 50s by Harvard Business School, and
Yes.
we follow the case study approach. So in that respect, what we do is experiential learning. In other words, real cases from companies that they faced a problem. The class goes away, thinks about it, discusses it, and then presents it. And then they're told what the solution was after they've gone through the experience of reliving that problem
Right,
themselves.
right.
I personally think it's a very fun way to learn, but then I would do because that's what I do for a living. But on the other hand, it's exactly what companies facing disruption need to do. So they're welcome to look at these. So there's also the traditional MBA. We also do um, other sort of areas where data science and so forth. So we're very focused on the digital transformation, and in fact have the fastest supercomputer in Southeast Asia. So
Oh,
sort of we don't just talk the talk, we walk the talk as well.
that's fascinating, especially with the case study, because uh, for me, it wasn't so much whether you got the answer right or wrong. It was more of I want to see the way you're thinking, because that's what the value is. Okay, it's not so much even just the way you piece things together. That's where much of the value is, because that's where much of the innovation comes
Yeah,
from.
and in a Philippine context, it's really interesting to see as the students come on board and move through the process, uh, the engagement changes.
Yeah.
Obviously, as I said, there's a high power distance in the Philippines, and to challenge someone, even as what's called a devil's advocate, taking a position you're uncomfortable
Yeah.
with just to see what the outcome is, that's something which hasn't really been taught in
Oh,
schools in undergraduate degrees in the Philippines. So,
I'll have to consider that, because I'm in the sphere of leadership training, facilitation, that kind of thing. And that is a very valuable thing. In fact, it's funny because there's an old movie, gosh, what was it? Night Shift, I think it was. Really, really old. I think it's early 80s when I was watching it. And Michael Keaton was very young. He goes, I'm an ideas guy. I go, I thought, since I love tuna spread, I was thinking of feeding mayonnaise to the tuna so then I can have tuna spread. Now, it's a silly idea,
yeah,
but if you look at the thought process, it makes sense. Let's combine some things in the production line, if you want to say. Let's see if we can bring them in earlier. So, everything is done faster. You wind up with,
yeah.
and the thought process is very valuable, even though the idea is silly. Okay, so,
No, but there are valid ideas like that. Like, for example, they're genetically engineering bananas with, for example, vaccines inside so that they grow and give you
oh,
immunity. So there are concepts that are being applied like that.
yeah, well, that's fascinating. I never heard of that one. So, so instead of going to the doctor, you just have your, or in our day, sometimes you'd be left
Have
with
your
a
daily
scar
banana,
somewhere. You
exactly.
have your daily banana. So now it's have a banana keeps the doctor away. It's not an apple. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's fascinating. And for me, the biggest takeaway for me is while I am an eternal optimist, I also believe that we still have to deal with all the monsters that are going to come out. Okay. And at least this conversation with you has given me the sense that, yes, there are monsters, but we can deal with it.
yeah.
I mean, we'll, we'll,
Every
we'll, we'll overcome
generation
it.
has had its monsters to face,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
human progression has been what we called in the financial services industry the triumph of the optimists. If you go around predicting Armageddon, you would have got nowhere in any generation in history.
I agree. We're all gonna die. Okay. All right. Professor Broby, it's been wonderful speaking to you. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and you opened my eyes to a lot of things about fintech, uh, and especially when it comes to the origin of crypto.
Excellent.
Because when I ran into crypto, I said this looks like a way somebody can just invent his own money and move it around. Nobody knows. That's the first thing I made. But I said, wow, I didn't know it was like kind of replacing or going back to the gold standard kind of idea.
Yeah.
And that I found really, really interesting and fascinating in itself. For our viewers, if you enjoyed this, if you found this valuable, please smash those like, subscribe, follow buttons. And if you want to talk to Professor Broby, you can either reach him through LinkedIn or you can call up AIM and say, "Hey, I want to talk to Professor Broby." And I'm sure I'd love to join one of your classes if I could, just to see the world. I'm not in it itself.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, but
you're
just
welcome. We have open door policy. We're very
just to see it is because it's something that maybe I'd like to get to know more about, if you want to say. Daniel, thank you so much. And for episode 6, we will have Jonas Diego, who will be talking about why company culture is a competitive advantage in business. And as always, learning is a never ending journey with limitless vistas.